Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Lee. While reading these two novels, Down the Rabbit Hole by Juan Pablo Villalobos and Our Lady of the Assassin by Fernando Vallejo, I noticed something interesting. Both included children thrown into the world of drugs. And so my topic develops. Ignorance is bliss, a child's perspective in a drug-ridden world. And so with that, I came to think. With two novels that both depict the drug cartel and the violence along with it, the readers can see children being exposed to this environment. In Our Lady of the Assassin by Fernando Vallejo, Alexis is a 16-year-old hitman, while in Down the Rabbit Hole by Juan Pablo Villalobos, Tosh Lee, a 10-year-old, is raised by a drug lord in a mansion constantly surrounded by violence. With all of this in mind, the question that comes up is, why did the author decide to tell their story of the drug cartel through the perspective of a child? There could have been many other characters in the novel to show the life surrounded by drugs. So why a child instead? This leads up to an important point of both novels. By deciding to include children in the novel, it will shape and change the reader's perception on how the rest of the novel will be. With the biased or unbiased that may come up in a child's perception or their relationship with those around them, we, the reader, now understand the novel differently. With that in mind, I came up with a point that I would like to further discuss. As a result of the drug cartel, it has warped both the perspectives of Alexis and Tosh Lee. This leads to desensitizing the two children to the violence and crimes around them, thus portraying how the violence and drugs affect the coming of age for the children impacted by the environment. First, we will be discussing Alexis from Our Lady of the Assassin. Alexis is a 16-year-old sicario. What this means is that he is a hitman. He is paid to kill people. He is also a prostitute. At such a young age, he is already exposed to the harsh and violent world. In doing so, he is exposed to the violence and drugs daily. As a sicario, he plays an active role in the drug cartel, being directly involved with the environment constantly. Being a prostitute, he is exposed to Fernando, the narrator of this novel. We follow their developing relationship throughout the novel and see how one impacts the other. With that being said, Alexis is known as the Exterminating Angel. He is deemed this name by Fernando, who defends his actions and killings. Being such a young age, he is deemed an angel for exterminating and killing people. This tells an extremely morbid story for a 16-year-old to have developed such a reputation with no remorse whatsoever. The story takes place in Medellin, Colombia, a very corrupted town known for its violence and drugs. And by seeing one person out of the population, the readers slowly get a grasp of the severity and drasticity of the situation in Medellin. And for the audience of this novel, it has warped their sense of Colombia. The country is now seen as only corrupted and full of drug trafficking. This portrayal of Colombia for what the audience initially believed in is no longer. We now see Medellin raises their children to become a part of the drug cartel. Medellin is making these sicarios and affecting the coming of age for these children. And from what was portrayed from Alexis being a 16-year-old sicario, we the readers have been impacted so much already. Still a child, the readers would have definitely thought the children to be portrayed differently, rather than involved with drugs. Vallejo, and later discussed Villalobos, would both give the readers insight into the mind of both children, reminding us that they are in fact children. They are not sicarios or the son of the drug lord. They are children. They are children who still have emotions and a sense of humanity that have not been completely warped. Just yet. What we see here in this quote is exactly what I have just depicted. Vallejo has shown us a side of Alexis who, when asked to shoot a dog out of misery, could not do it. The quote reads, The important look of those gentle, innocent eyes will remain with me for as long as I live. I can't do it, Alexis said. You got to, I said. I can't, he repeated. I took the revolver from inside his belt, put the barrel against the dog's breast, and pulled the trigger. Alexis is a hitman, paid to kill anyone necessary. The one that is deemed the exterminating angel could not kill a dog that was suffering. This doesn't remind us that Alexis is still a child and is only 16 years old. He is a child that has been shaped by his environment and those around him, causing him to become the person that he is. Yet here, we can see a childlike person, a person who could not kill a dog. He still had a sense of morale and judgment that had not been completely warped just yet. Now we will be discussing of Tosh Lee from Down the Rabbit Hole. Tosh Lee is a 10-year-old boy that lives in the palace with his father, an infamous drug lord, along with a few other members, a part of the drug cartel as well. Tosh Lee describes himself as precocious, and he would indeed be precocious. Raised by a drug lord, it is no surprise that Tosh Lee is constantly surrounded by the violence and drugs. Having been desensitized to the constant violence around him, he describes these scenarios very nonchalantly. It gives off the impression that he is more naive and innocent than the readers would think. Even though he witnesses the killings and drug deals, he dismisses these or describes them in a light-hearted manner. We, the readers, are taken aback that a 10-year-old can react in this sort of manner, him viewing murders as nothing more than a corpse. And as he witnesses these, he does not participate in the killing of people like Alexis does, but rather, he takes on a passive role, only observing what happens around him. We can see this innocence more prominently when we reach the scene of both Tosh Lee and his father flying from Mexico to Liberia. Living in an isolated palace in Mexico, Tosh Lee is unaware of what goes outside of his surroundings, believing that what the people around him are doing is justified. He sees no issues in killing, drug deals, etc. With that in mind, he picks up different fascinations around him. He develops a fascination for hats, samurais, and particularly hippopotamuses. With the extravagance of money that they have, Tosh Lee flies to Liberia to get a hippo of his very own, a Liberian pygmy hippo, only exclusive to that country. What Tosh Lee does not realize is that he is also leaving Mexico for the reason that his father is trying to not be suspected as being a drug lord. From this, the readers have perceived quite a lot. We learn that Mexico is such a violent and drug-ridden country that people have viewed it nonchalantly, almost heartless, much like what Tosh Lee is showing. We also see that the people involved in the drug cartel live a very extravagant lifestyle. Tosh Lee wanted a Liberian pygmy hippo, and so his family would use this trip for Tosh Lee as a disguise for themselves, as well as to get Tosh Lee his very own hippo. They see no issues in what they are doing whatsoever. This would now be the portrait that is painted for Mexico for the readers. It is full of drug lords and violence. Moving on, as we just discussed the perception of violence in Mexico, we can see that sometimes the innocence in Tosh Lee does show despite the perception that has been built for the readers by the way he has been acting so far. We can see that much like Alexis, Tosh Lee does show emotions and the child that he really is, being only 10 years old. During their trip to Liberia, Tosh Lee did acquire 2 hippos, yet both would fall extremely ill before being transported to Mexico. Both hippos would have to be put down as they were too sick already. The quote reads, "Winston Lopez gave John Kennedy Johnson the order to kill our Liberian pygmy hippopotamuses. When I calmed down, I had a really strange feeling in my chest. It was hot, and it didn't hurt, but it made me think I was the most pathetic person in the whole universe." We can see that Tosh Lee is definitely struck by this, and he feels the pain from seeing 2 animals being killed, despite seeing people get killed constantly. We can see that Tosh Lee is still a child. He is definitely affected by this death, which surprises him, as he would not normally feel any remorse or pain for those killed. This definitely shows another side of Tosh Lee that we would not normally see, as he was raised by the drug lords and traffickers his entire life. He was shaped into the person that he is, but rather, we can see his true nature show a little. After seeing these two different yet very similar characters, we do realize that both Alexis and Tosh Lee are children. Put into a world of drugs and violence, they had no choice but to grow up in this environment, and therefore they became desensitized to it all. What resulted from this was a lack of compassion and remorse that they would have for the people being killed. What I would say is that the authors definitely took advantage of the perception that the readers would associate with children. We read the book thinking that the children are innocent, only to see that they are more involved and violent than initially thought. Their thoughts and actions go against what we typically think of children, seeing them nonchalantly refer to violence and drugs. Yet in doing so, the author includes small insights into the children, and we see that they are indeed a product of their environment. In certain occasions, they do reveal a more humane side of them, seeing them show compassion when it came to animals being killed. And what this all does is give a dark glimpse into the life of growing up, surrounded by violence and drugs. It impacts the children that are coming of age who are now stuck in this cycle. And not only that, but it also affects the future generations as well. The countries impacted are now portrayed more negatively and will continue to be so as more readers stumble upon this novel. This becomes what the countries are only known by, rather than the positives, as the drugs and violence has masked what they have to offer, such as their culture, lifestyle, etc. Thank you, and this has been my presentation.